and the executive vice president still had to review and sign off on everybody's travel. Now, you can imagine thousands of people in a company like that traveling, and I'm thinking to myself, where does he get the time to do that and to do what he really needs to be doing to run a multi-billion-dollar company?
Warning: Damian Andrews' growing revenue and profit, if implemented, will put more money in your pocket. Please use with caution.
Welcome to Damian Andrews' Growing Revenue and Profit with international speaker and revenue and growth specialist, Damian Andrews. This is your source for practical, usable, and simple action steps that you can do every day to put more money in your pocket. And now, the host of Damian Andrews' Growing Revenue and Profit, Damian Andrews.
And the crowd cheers wildly to the trumpeting blasts of elephants sliding through eyes of needles. This is Damian Andrews' Growing Revenue and Profit, the program that deals with all things that put more cash in your pocket. This is the show that handles your revenue riddles, profit puzzles, operational oddities, and culture conundrums. I am the one, the only Damian Andrews, and on this show it is my pleasure to have the amazing Peter Christian. Peter is an author of 2 best-selling books, What is the Vermin Problem? And Influences and Influencers. Peter was also the founding partner and president of ESPI, a prominent business consulting company, and he's worked with over 300 clients throughout the United States and Europe. Pleasure to have you on the show, Peter.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, well, let's dive straight into this. I mean, you've worked with a number of different companies.
Yes.
What would you say would be one of the key issues that they struggle with in growing their revenue and profit?
They try to treat their companies like they were still small companies, and they're not anymore. And it's very different when you get to, let's say, the $5 to $10 million US dollar mark as far as the size of the company. It takes on different dimensions. It is certainly not something where you as the owner can be involved in all the day-to-day details. You need to be handing things like that off to other people and trusting them. And unfortunately, too many business owners don't approach it that way. They think that they can still be involved in everything, and it causes a lot of problems for them.
I understand that completely. One of a client that I got involved with very late in the piece, they went from 35 million to 110 million and didn't change any of their systems. And the directors were very, very highly strung.
So, I bet they were. And they were scrambling.
Oh, very much so. And they came from a big organization as well, so they should have known better. But
yes.
Yeah, unfortunately, they weren't able to be saved either, which is one of those detriments of not adapting. Because what you're talking about there is there's certain scales, and adapting to those scales and levels of business.
Yes.
Is part of that when you look at this ability to grow the business, is part of that accepting that you need to let go of some of that control?
Absolutely. I worked with a multi-billion-dollar company, and the executive vice president still had to review and sign off on everybody's travel. Now, you can imagine thousands of people in a company like that traveling, and I'm thinking to myself, where does he get the time to do that and to do what he really needs to be doing to run a multi-billion-dollar company? So it just astounds you sometimes at what some of the executives will do or don't do, as the case may be.
That's an interesting point that you made there, or a very extremely highly important point. Interesting is not the right word there. It's important. You mentioned do what they need to do.
Yes.
And if we are going to, and yes, for a small, one-person band, that's getting up and running. You're doing everything, of course. You argue that because that's all you have. In most cases, it's not like a lot of people are coming into starting a business with a lot of resources behind them, so that they can't delegate as such. They don't have those resources. How do you, if you were to start at the very beginning, you had the resource to do it, what is what you need to do? What are the key things that needs to be done to grow revenue and profit?
Well, of course, when you're starting off, the thing is to get your feet on the ground, to get your clients, if you've got products, to get them out there and promote them, make sure that they're working well, schmoozing with the customers, as the case may be, and so forth. But once you've established that, okay, and now you've got a track record and you are growing. You can't have that hands-on that you did. It's your baby, but it isn't a baby anymore. And I look at my grandson right now. He's 18 months old. He's running around the house and creating all sorts of terror and stuff. It's not the way he was a year ago when he was 6 months old, when he was still kind of laying there and cooing and gooing and that. And you have to realize that in the business as well. It ain't the same and you can't treat it the same. And unfortunately, some people have trouble letting go because it is their baby, all right? And they treat it as such. And they don't have the trust in other people to let things go. They want to have their hands in everything. And they really, really can't. And quite honestly, you're going to not attract or not keep good people if you allow that to happen, because they're going to be frustrated. They know that they've got capabilities and so forth. And if somebody's sitting over them, micromanaging them, it just isn't going to work, and you're going to lose those people. Plus, then everybody's going to look at that one individual and say, well, when he tells me or she tells me, if it's a female person, what to do, then I'll do it. But till then, I'll just keep doing whatever it is I'm doing. Well, that's no good either. All right. Because then everything falls on that one individual to make all the decisions and to tell people what to do. And they just can't keep track of all that stuff. There's too much going on. And also, you're now in that growth period, like you said, with the one client you had that grew tremendously. Well, that takes your time to manage that type of stuff, and you don't have time for all those other things. That's why you have people to do that. And if you don't trust them, and if you're going to keep treating it like a baby, guess what? It's going to be a baby, because it's going to shrink back down to where it was before. So be very, very careful about how you approach things and how you deal with them.
Exactly. It sounds like you have a little executive running around already at 18 months, getting into everything.
Yes, he does. Yeah, he rules the house already. It's amazing how quickly they take over.
Exactly. And that isn't I think a valid analogy, because they're into everything and want to know everything, as an owner of a company does. And that's what I was wondering, from what is that trait? It sounds like, you're talking about trust there, being able to have that trust. Is that a trait that is a good thing to develop early in the piece when you're starting up a company, to go, okay, to create that segregation so you don't get that really strong attachment and be able to let go?
Absolutely. And again, you don't turn everything over at one time. You do it bit by bit. Okay, and you see how the person works out, because again, sometimes we make poor judgments and we think somebody is truly capable and they turn out not to be. But as they prove themselves, and you turn over the next piece and the next piece, and you don't have to turn over everything, okay, but you certainly want to turn over a lot of the day-to-day stuff, and I wouldn't say trivial, because in business, everything is fairly important, but the less important things, because your focus is going to be on that growth and the new things that you're going to add and the staffing that you're going to need. I mean, there's a lot of big decisions that have to be made, and probably taking out loans and working with different companies, and maybe going from a national company to an international company. That all takes time, and you don't have time for that other stuff. And if you do, like the guy who's signing off on everybody's travel, then you're not paying attention to the big stuff, and that's where problems crop up.
So from that perspective, what it sounds like you're talking about is sensible scaling.
Yes.
Um, so when you're looking at that, because I know I've seen seen it where people have tried to do everything all at once really, really quickly,
Yes.
and they've underestimated. I love that chart that you see, and it shows two paths. One that says, this was the plan, and it's got
Yep.
a nice little, from one place to the other, and it's a nice straight road. And then they go, this is what happened. And, from that perspective, how much does optimism bias play into, businesses getting into trouble and having difficulties in growing, let alone, and then surviving? Because there's an element of optimism bias there, or you could take it the other way, ignorance, where people have an expectation that's going to go a certain way, but don't realize that that's not the reality.
Right. Believe me, anybody who's dealt with plans knows that there's never a straight line.
Mm,
Okay. There's always twists and turns, unforeseen things that crop up. Maybe the plant goes down because you had an electrical problem or a fire, or one of your key suppliers suddenly isn't delivering, or a key client suddenly decides that they don't want to do business with you anymore. All sorts of things crop up. And you've got to deal with those things. It's just life, okay? No matter how well you try to plan and to make sure that problems don't occur, they do occur. That's just life.
mm,
And you said, sometimes they're too optimistic, sometimes they're too pessimistic. Sometimes
mm,
they're so conservative that instead of planning for that growth and maybe having that extra resource on hand, they wait until it's too late and now they're scrambling. So
mm,
there's a real balance in there. And you can read all the books you want. It's just you get a sense for how things are going,
mm.
and you work appropriately with that. Then if things take off, and sometimes they do, most companies have a 5-year plan, and within 2 years they're redoing it because it's obsolete. You might say, well, why did they do 5 years if it's only good for 2? Well, it's kind of a traditional thing, and you do want to look out and get a sense for where you're headed. But within 2 years, you're revisiting that and you're making adaptations to it. If you've surpassed it, then certainly you don't stick with the 5-year plan because you're way past where you thought you were going to be. Maybe you're at the 5-year point after 2 years. So you're not going to continue with that because you're already at $100 million. So now you're looking at 200 million or whatever the case may be. On the other hand, if you're not achieving what you thought you were, you've got to look back and say, what's going wrong and what do I need to fix it? Because things are pretty good, but there's something just not right that's happening, and I need to find out what that is and correct that and get back on the right path again. So it's a real balance, and you can read all the books you want in the world. You can get all the advice you want in the world, but sometimes you just got to dig in and find out what the problems are or what the good things are, and then go with them and adjust your plan.
How important is it from that perspective when you've got the plan sorted out, and planning's a whole different process? But once you've got the plan and you're starting to execute, or even going through the process of planning, now that I'm thinking about it, is how important is it to have external people, say mentors, if you're a smaller, or a board or a mastermind, to actually work through some of these details with?
It depends on the size of the company.
Mm,
It depends again on who you can trust and who you have a good working relationship with, because there's lots of people out here who want to give you advice. All right. And some of it's going to be good and some of it's not going to be good. And you need
Yep.
to find out the ones that are giving you good advice and are truly going to help you, and the other ones that are just in it because they see a cash cow and they think that they can make a lot of money off of you. And if it doesn't pan out, then they just move on to the next. So again, you get back to that trust issue again, and dealing with folks that will do a good job for you and can do a good job for you. You certainly can use them in a pinch when you've hit that growth level, almost straight up, and you can't bring people on fast enough. So you hire on maybe on a temporary basis, people to help you out until you can get the right people in place on a full-time basis, or that can, give you some advice on what to do because you didn't expect that. Okay. You're new to the game, and all of a sudden you're faced with something that you didn't expect, and you need some advice. You need some good advice. So hopefully you will find some good people who've been down that road who can tell you, yes, I've been through what you're going through, and here's what I did. Now, it's not going to be exactly the same, but it's going to be close enough, and you take advice from them, and then you make it happen.
From that perspective of finding advice, because like you said, there is a lot of advice out there, and certainly if you're anywhere on social media, there's tons of advice. How does someone know whether it's good advice or not?
You vet. You talk to people that you know and trust who may be in the same business you are, or who are good friends who have used individuals or companies of the type that you're looking at, who can say, yes, I've used these folks and here's what they did and here's who you need to work with. Because again, you hire a company and you expect a certain individual, and all of a sudden you get somebody who you didn't expect. And you have no idea who that person is. And again, you don't give them everything all at once. You feed pieces of it to them and see how well they're doing. Because if you throw too much at them, you're putting yourself at risk, for one thing. And also you may overwhelm them. So you need to kind of met out what it is that you're giving the people. Let them prove themselves to you. Because even though they may have proven themselves to your friends, to your coworkers, to your business connections, whatever, we all mess up sometimes. So you have to be careful about that too. But anyway, you develop that working relationship, that trust over time, and they become a valuable asset to you. I had one client, whenever they had a one-off project, and they were very honest. They said, if it's something that's going to be on an ongoing basis, we will do it internally with our people. If it's a one-offer, we won't put our people's time into it, although they did because they were still involved in the project. But we will give you that, and you will teach us, and then we will incorporate it, and then we will make a go of it. And we had that great relationship. And I think we did 10 or 12 projects with them, each of a different kind. And they did exactly that. They learned from what we were doing. They were involved in it. And then they took it over. And then that one was done. And we moved on to the next one. And they were extremely successful and continue to be. They just grow by leaps and bounds because they knew what they were capable of. They knew what they weren't capable of. They knew what they needed to learn, and they learned it, and they knew that their success was based on what they did, even more so than what I and the other consultants did. That the test of time was that they took the ownership of it and made it happen. And companies need to realize that no matter who you use, at the end of the day, it's your baby and you've got to make it work. And anybody who thinks that they're going to have a hired gun come in and take care of everything for them is really looking at the wrong thing as well. It's still your company and you still have to run it, because that person shouldn't be there and won't be there forever. And when they walk out the door, if all the good stuff goes out with them, then you haven't done things correctly. And that's what I always try to get across to my clients is, at the end of the day, it's your baby. I'm here to help you. I'm here to do as much as I can, but I'm not going to be here forever, and I'm not. Any of those 300 companies that we mentioned, I don't still do work with them, all right? And there's most of them, by and large, are doing fine because they took on what they needed to, and they've done a good job with it. And again, I retired, so I'm not involved to be able to do that with them. So anyway, so there's a lot that goes on that you really have to be aware of as a company owner or an executive.
How important is that, what you're talking about? And it's probably a rhetorical question, but that ownership of going, okay, it's my company for the smaller, the SMEs that are out there. Is it, how much of that is really owning and going, okay, this is my responsibility. I need to learn the skills that I need to learn to make this work, not rely on somebody else. And as you say, then, get surprised when they walk out the door.
Right. The ones that make it realize that. The ones that don't think that there's somebody who's got that magic wand or that silver bullet and they're going to use it and everything is going to be fine and it's going to be fine forever. It doesn't work that way. Life doesn't work that way. Business certainly doesn't work that way. It's work. And every day you're working it. And every day you're going to come across different things and you have to deal with them. But you learn, and you learn to have better judgments about things, and you learn the new tools and techniques and processes that are available to you that are going to make you better, and you put the new systems in place and all that stuff, and you learn to use them. I watch some of these shows where they go in to fix a company, and the owner has no idea what's going on. I mean, zero idea.
Yes.
And they say, well, how do you expect to run the company if you have zero idea? And they just kind of shrug. And you go, some people just aren't meant to run businesses or to own businesses. They just aren't. They think that it's a walk in the park and you just show up every day and turn the lights on and everything's going to be fine. It doesn't work that way. I wish it did. I mean, I certainly did. I didn't look forward to the problems and the headaches, but you had to deal with them, okay? And you loved the days when you didn't have that, when you didn't have people banging on your door going, what's going on now and what we got? Oh, my God, okay? So you loved those days and then you enjoyed them, all right? But you also were prepared for the ones where they banged on your door and said, what's going on now? And you said, what now? Let's sit down and talk about it, and then you deal with it. And that's just what the business is all about.
Yeah, and how much of it is that finding those right people, embracing the right people? A person who wasn't a client, but they had a large company. It was an $80 million turnover company. And he was very much involved in the day-to-day to the extent it made him sick. He actually got really sick and was bedridden for 9 months, so he couldn't go in. But what happened in that 9 months is that business grew substantially. The employee, even though he was getting reports and stuff, so he knew what was going on and he understood what the business was. But then he realized, and this was what he said to me, he goes, I realized that I needed to get out of their way. And they took that business without his being there every day after that. They took the business to over $100 million, the employees did, while he wasn't there. I mean, now he says, he was recently just riding his motorbike in Mongolia for 3 months while he's getting reports. And how much of it is that developing that, as you said, that trust, finding the right people and then getting out of their way?
A lot, because you're going to grow. And you're not going to grow just by, again, you controlling it. Let's take a very extreme example. How much of the day-to-day stuff do you think Jeff Bezos is involved in and knows about at Amazon?
Yeah, it'd be
virtually nothing anymore. Okay?
Yeah.
But he did. If you see the first pictures of Jeff Bezos when he started Amazon, it was in a desk in his garage, and he was in charge of everything. All right? And where is he today? He's on that luxury yacht with his new girlfriend, right? Okay. But yet he knows the important things that are going on. All right. And he has changed his viewpoint and his mindset and what he's involved in. And that's what he focuses on. And he's got tons of people doing all those other things. All right. And that didn't happen overnight. That happened over a period of time, but it happened, and that's why they're successful, and they continue to be successful. The ones that aren't don't do that, and sometimes, with the person that you were just mentioning, you get to the point where you say, I can't handle this anymore. All right? I liked it when it was small. Okay, I liked it when it was a $20 million company or 25 or whatever. And 80 or 100, it's just too big for me.
Mm.
And what they do is they get out, they sell out, they make their money, and maybe they start another enterprise and it's smaller and they're happier doing that because they don't like all the other stuff that's involved when you get to be 80 or 100 or 150 million or whatever the case may be. That's
Mm.
not what they enjoy doing. They like having their hands on stuff and so forth, and they realize they can't do it anymore. And also, it isn't worth their health to them.
Is that
It's
something
not
from
worth
that
getting sick.
perspective? Yeah, from that perspective, for the SMEs that are listening in, being very clear about what it is that works for you. One of my clients is, they got to 25 million turnover, and they went, "Where we've had enough. That's where we're at," and they've been at that for the past 3 years, and they're comfortable, they're happy, they're ticking over, it's all working very smoothly. Is that really, from that perspective, knowing what works for you?
Absolutely. I mean, life is not just about doing business. There's that old saying about the guy in his deathbed who says, I wish that I had had 10 more minutes in the office as opposed to 10 more minutes with the family. So there is a balance in life, and
Yeah.
work is part of it. Okay, but so is living your life and doing other things. And when you're so consumed in that, now some people are, and so be it. All right, that's life. But most of us aren't. We want to have a life balance and we want to be able to do other things. We want to enjoy the fruits of the efforts that we put out. And when we can't do that, all right, when we can't go out for a night with our family or go on a vacation because the business is always calling, then at that point, you've got to kind of sit and say, what is it I really want out of life? And
Mm.
like you said, that the company that decided that 25 million was it, and they were very comfortable and happy, and they were doing everything that they wanted to do, and they were making the money. There's nothing wrong with that. Nobody said you have to start and be 100 million or 200 million or $1 billion company.
Mm.
You have to do what you enjoy, and
Mm.
you have to be successful at it. And when you hit a certain plateau and you say, that's it, I'm very happy where I'm at, quite honestly, sometimes maintaining where you're at takes a lot of effort.
Mm.
Okay? Because again, things change and you'll get new competitors and new markets and all that stuff and clients who ask for other things and so forth. And you still have to deal with all that stuff just to stay at where you're at.
Mm.
And there's nothing wrong with that. There really, really isn't. It depends on the individual and what you want out of not just your business, but what you want out of your life and where business fits in as that part of your life.
What are some of the key things that should focus on within a business to make it work? I mean, I've seen a number of people, they'll focus on getting their flashy brochures, flashy websites, spend all this time doing that. Whereas, other times, I've looked at other clients where, they don't spend any of that time. They're just focused on their sustainable, profitable market and
Yeah.
delivering that. So what are some of those key things for a business to focus on to maintain, well, certainly to maintain where they're at, but also to grow their revenue and profit?
Are you keeping your clients happy? Are
Mm.
you meeting their needs? Okay. Or are you getting more and more complaints and things aren't running as smoothly and you're not getting your product to them on time, or the product that you're getting to them or the service is not the same quality that it used to be? And if that's the case, then you've got to determine what's happening there. Am I losing touch with them, or have I gotten so big that I'm getting sloppy at what I'm doing? All
Mm.
right, and in that case, you need to pull back a little bit because once the word gets out, particularly with clients that have been with you for a while, new ones are going to be certainly hesitant about wanting to come on board. They're going, well, if that's the way they treat somebody that they've done business with for 10 to 20 years, you can imagine what they're doing to me as the new guy. All right.
Mm.
Um, so you certainly need to do that. You don't have to have the flashiest bells and whistles. I was just talking to somebody today. There's a balance of automation in an operation. You can actually over automate to where you spent so much money and now it's not functioning the way you want it to and you lost control of it, versus you may have perfectly good systems, equipment in place, those types of things. And if you just maintain them and run them, you don't have to have the newest, flashiest, most expensive stuff there is in the marketplace, because that doesn't always do the job for you. And again, it's using some common sense and understanding the balances and working within that stuff. I know startup companies that bought humongous computer systems to start with. Well, they didn't need it. They needed small computer systems, but they spent millions of dollars on this stuff instead of on other things, and then all of a sudden they were having cash flow issues. Well, no kidding. You spent money on stuff that you didn't need, and you're probably not using properly. You're maybe using 1% of what the capability is, and it's crazy. So use your head, okay? Yes, it's great to dream large, but don't. There's that old saying about steak appetite on a hamburger budget. You don't want to be in that situation. Okay, if you can afford hamburger, you have hamburger. When you can afford steak, then you buy steak. Okay, and you don't have to have the best cut of steak. A sirloin will do fine instead of a fillet if that's what the need is. And be happy with that stuff and understand what you're doing and then continue to do it. All right? And as the changes are necessary, make the changes that are necessary and don't get into stuff that you don't need to be into. And you'll be very successful at that. And ask your clients every now and again, how are things going? Are you happy? Has anything changed? What's changed? And if they tell you everything is fine, then listen to them. Don't ask for trouble where there is none. But if they're telling you there's problems and things aren't the way they should be, listen to them as well. And then fix it.
How much of that, because it seems to be there's this need to project this super successful, super massive, how much of it is really being authentic to who you are and aiming at that niche that fits with who you are, rather than trying to be everything to everybody?
Sometimes we get caught in trying to be something where we're not, and that's a problem too. When you're not true to yourself, all right, when you're acting the way you shouldn't be, and people are kind of shaking their head and going, "Is that really Peter? That doesn't seem like the Peter I know. Boy, he's changed." You don't want to hear that. You want to hear, that's the same guy I know. He's reliable. He understands. He listens. He does something about it, as opposed to, he really could care less about us. We're just one of many anymore. You don't want to hear that from your folks. Similarly with the people who are working for you. All right? As you get bigger, you don't get bigger and sloppier and allow anything to go and so forth. You've got a culture that you've established that you continue, all right? And granted, as you get bigger, things will change a bit and so forth, and you have to change with that. But by and large, the values that you instilled should still be there. Treat people fairly, treat people with respect, listen to your customers, listen to your employees when they tell you things are a problem and we need to address it. We need to address it as soon as we can. Because if you don't, you may be addressing it when it's too late to do something about it. So keep your pulse on what's going on, okay? And even as a large company, don't give up the values that you started as a small company.
And for growing as well, certainly growing sales, marketing's involved. How important is it to be really good at the marketing channels that you aim at? We have a business organization here in Australia. It's run by a friend of mine. And he, when he started, just focused on advertising on radio. And as the business grew, he put more money into radio and only advertised on radio. And he also became a national phenomenon and an iconic business person in Australia, and only ever advertised on radio. It actually became unique for the brand that he created. Is it how, I mean, because when people look at it, they try and, from what I've seen, people try and go to all different areas. Is it better to focus in and do something really well in that area? Again, making a rhetorical question, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to, I mean, from that
Yes.
perspective, when you look at
How's that for an
marketing,
answer? Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
But I mean, how does someone do that? Because you have all this pressure, so to speak, to do ad marketing in all these different spaces. You look at something, take a Coca-Cola, for example, it advertises across a broad range of spectrums. I mean, when you're growing in yourself, how do you actually choose which is the best area to market in?
Again, if you have a solid foundation, and let's say that it was in radio, certainly stay in radio. Don't give it up, because you obviously have, but you watch the trends. Are people still listening to radio? Which radio stations are they listening to? Are there new ones that are out, or have the ones that you've been dealing with been gobbled up by other people? What's going on there? And are they still giving us the play that we need? But as you become more successful, people are going to be seeking you out, because they want part of the action, okay? And they certainly want to be a part of what you're doing, especially if you're a hot ticket. And you have to evaluate then. And yeah, it's okay to try, print if that's what you hadn't been doing before, or going into television, or or certainly social media and stuff that we have on our computers now and so forth. But don't give up the stuff that got you there. All right. Continue to use that, and maybe just reach out into some other areas where you find out that maybe the new target audience that you're looking at to add to, not to replace, but to add to the audience you already have, where their interests lie. And then again, don't go whole hog into it. Start slow, see how it goes. And if it's successful, then you can add to it. And if it's not so successful, you can reevaluate and say, am I doing it in the right spot? And am I doing the right thing? And so forth. So again, there's no one right or wrong. It's a trial and error type of thing. But I always say, when you build a solid foundation, do not neglect that foundation. Okay? Because when you do, and you forget about it, it can cause you trouble, because you spend all your time on that new shiny toy that you're looking at. And when you forget about the old reliable that's in there, it needs attention too, because it can go away. Because somebody else can jump in and supplant you. Okay. Yeah. Or people, again, will think that you've forgotten about them, or or you're taking them for granted. And they go, guess what? I can use my dollars, and I can shop elsewhere, whether it's a service or a product or whatever the case is that you're trying to get them to use. Okay. So you've got to maintain that.
It sounds fundamentally, there's a theme that I'm picking up from what you're talking about. One is developing trust and take care of the people that you work with.
Yes.
Yeah.
They got you there. Got you there. So why are you going to ignore them now? And why are you going to give them up? That's crazy.
I know. I feel like I always ask rhetorical questions, because to me it seems very easy. Take care of the people you look after, take care of people, and things will take care of themselves.
Absolutely. And don't forget who got you there.
So if we're running out of time, but from that perspective, if you were to put it into a nutshell, yes. How would you sum up, what would be the key takeaway you'd want people to have to grow their revenue and profit in their business?
Have a plan, update that plan, depending on which way it goes, either that you're exceeding it or that you're falling short of it. Make modifications, whatever are necessary to get you back on track. Be committed to the plan. All right. Don't, wait a month and say, oh, well, things aren't going right, so I'm going to trash this and try doing something else.
Yes.
No, that's not long enough. Be committed to it.
Mm.
But also realize that when things aren't working, and then you have to modify it. Bring the right people on board. Okay. People that you can trust and that you can turn things over to so that you don't have to pay attention to all the nitty-gritty details. They will do that. All right. And they do not need you watching over them. So you can go motorbiking wherever it is for 3 months in Morocco or wherever. Or maybe not, but that you're focusing on the other things that are important. But you're staying in touch with them so that they know that what they're doing is important and you are keeping tabs on it and you expect results and so forth. Stay up on the trends. Okay. We can look at all sorts of different markets where the leader at one time either isn't the leader anymore or maybe even doesn't exist because they didn't stay up on the trends. Little things like videos. I don't know what your big video chains were or are in Australia, but we had Blockbuster Video here. That doesn't exist anymore. It got replaced by this little company called Netflix. Okay, because you don't have to go into a store to get your movie. You can just download it on or stream it on your TV and voila. Okay. And Blockbuster didn't get that until it was too late and they were dead in the water and they don't exist anymore. But yet they were the big kahuna at one time. That's just one example. I'm sure there's plenty of others we can look at. So stay up on the trends and also realize that your customers, even your existing ones, their tastes change over time and you need to adapt to the changes that they are requiring. A lot of companies, get into the product industry, but they don't service their product. Well, over time, companies are looking for someone who will provide service to their products or add-ons to it and so forth, and realize that, and then adapt your business to those changes and add those features that you didn't have before. If you do all of those things and watch your costs, okay, it's real easy to get lazy and sloppy, and all of a sudden your costs are out of whack. So stay on that and make sure that they're in line with where you want to be, and that as you grow, you're growing profitably. Okay. It's not just about growing, it's about growing profitably and at least the same rate that you're at, percentage-wise, or maybe even better, as the case may be. They all sound simple, but there's a lot of work that's involved to them.
Fantastic. There's a lot of sage advice there, Peter. Thank you very much for sharing. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. And yeah, it's been wonderful chatting with you. The audience, we've no doubt got a lot of your detail, or got a lot out of that, and we've got your details in the show notes. Thank you for taking the time.
Perfect. Thank you again for having me.